I mean, I think the relative penury of science is a corrupting variable. And the fact that we underfund science,
Yep.
and that it matters that when the rich guy comes into the room, right, to scientists because they're so starved for money, that's just corrupting.
Well, look, this is I've been on this.
Enterprise.
This is going to get us into the immigration question, which is that in the mid '80s under Reagan, the science complex, particularly the National Science Foundation under Eric Bloch, through the National Academy of Sciences and a subdivision called the Government and University Industry Research Roundtable, GUIRR, conspired to destroy the bargaining power of American scientists by flooding the market. And what they did is they did an economic analysis with both supply and demand curves to say that the wages, which you can calculate when you have two intersecting curves, were going to go above six figures for new PhDs.
So and then, let's get a lot of Indians in here. And
well, it was four countries. It was China, India, Taiwan, and Korea. Mm-hmm. And China went from 0 to 60 and they were sending us nobody. And then I think there were like over 25% of all graduate students. And of course, graduate students aren't students, they're workers. So there's a cryptic labor economy inside of the universities. And what the university system figured out is that in order to get this work done, we'd have to have these misclassified students who do the work imported as foreign workers. And what we would do is we would take the economic analysis, which they secretly did in 1986, and they'd subtract off the demand curve. And they'd just do a supply analysis based on the demography of the baby boom going into the baby bust, which is our generation, Gen X. And that demographic alarm was sounded to get the Immigration Act of 1990 passed, which has like the H-1B as one of its most famous features. So that's a whole story about how the actual workings, I'm the guy who uncovered that. And I chased that all the way down to the person who wrote that secret study that was never released, never dated, never authored.
Right.
That thing was the stepping away of the federal government from its commitment through the Vannevar Bush Endless Frontier Agreement to fund the kick-ass blue sky research that this country has done better than anyone else.
But how is that distinguishable from what on its face seems to me to be a rational policy, which is why not try to attract the world's best and brightest and incentivize them to start their businesses here, settle here. You know, once you've gotten your PhD at Harvard, you know, you've got a green card, and here's the Silicon Valley's over there. You know, I mean, so what? When
you start speaking, I feel like I'm hearing the Stars and Stripes forever. I've got one hand over my heart, and the Statue of Liberty is in the background with Emma Lazarus's poem at the base. Do you actually believe that?
No. My point is that strikes me as a good policy, even though that would create more competition for so-called Americans,
right? Because
we're now open for the world's business. But if you actually wanted to maximize, creativity and industry here, you would want to import Indians and Chinese and Taiwanese and Koreans.
Well, I mean, look, I've married the maximum number of brilliant women from the developing world who came here to do STEM that the law will allow.
Right.
So exactly. I'm absolutely guilty.
You got your wife, and then you want to close the border?
What? Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, first of all, that's how country clubs work. Right. So the idea is that
when you get
through a country club, when you get into a country club, you don't instantly say, well, I don't understand. It would be immoral for me to close the country club. I mean, so it's a very weird thing for me that people who are very steeped in what you were just talking about, which is this interesting mimetic complex that got pushed out, don't tend to think critically about it. Of course, we want the best people in the world to come to the U.S. selfishly. I mean,
well, not everyone doesn't. I mean, the person who has to compete with the best coming from India and Taiwan and China, that person, let's say in software engineering, that person is now suddenly on a much more competitive playing field, and
this is
So
what I was told about this,
but I'm not saying that it's not without cost to somebody. It's definitely costing somebody something.
right? Like the bad people, the people who
No, not the bad people, but just it's like
I don't even know how to go into all of the things that are like really funny and wrong about this. Like one of which is, well, are you afraid to compete with somebody from India? Well, maybe I'm afraid to compete with 100 people from India. You know, like the issue is what is the price point?
You're competing on this podcast. You're competing with people from India. I mean, you're competing with
No.
There are 800,000 podcasts.
No.
You're competing with 799
Because it's not a uniform. Because it's not a uniform product, Sam.
No, but it's still a landscape.
When you talked about software, right?
Right.
Most of software is glorified for and while loops. Let's not, you invoke a library, you code up a class.
You can outsource it, yeah.
All right. Well, no, I'm just saying that most of what it is you're just writing code.
Yeah.
And it's got a kind of a mystique about it because a lot of people haven't done it and it's too symbolic, whatever.
Right, but it's plumbing.
It's plumbing.
Yeah.
And a lot of science is plumbing.
Yeah.
And so a lot of the stuff about the best is not very relevant. If you wanted to take the stuff that's really distinguished, like you've got Ramanujan coming from India,
yeah.
You've got, Ellis coming from South Africa, whoever it is that's really amazing, we have plenty of room for the tiny number of people who are absolutely non-homogeneous super contributors.
So you're just saying you want to set the bar higher.
I'm not saying that. I'm saying a lot of different things. One is that people in a country have rights, and they have asymmetric rights to their own labor market. That's a large part of what it means to be a citizen of a country. If I start to talk about your rights that are perhaps your most valuable economic possession, if you really think about it, the American worker's most valuable economic possession is asymmetric access to the American labor market. If I say, your right is not an asset, but is instead an impediment, it's a barrier. And what we need to do is get rid of the red tape. And I'm not going to pay you for it because it's not an asset. I'm going to take it from you. And I'm going to say that that's what the free market is. Well, that has nothing to do with the free market. I wrote a paper called Migration for the Benefit of All that pointed out that you're free to securitize people's right and pay for it.
Right.
And then everybody wins.
Yeah.
That's not what we do.
Okay. So, but that's something we could do, though. We could put an economic
that would be a Coasian
price on
right.
that.
It's called a Coasian solution.
Right.
And the funny part about it, the hysterically funny part about it, is that no capitalists who claim that they're interested in getting rid of the inefficiency that comes from being forced to use your own labor are interested in the model in which you actually pay people for their securitized rights. Because the real thing they're interested in is not the tiny inefficiency, which is called the Harburger triangle. There's a giant structure below it called the Borjas rectangle, which is what is transferred from labor to capital.
The amazing thing is you've referenced this several times over cocktails.
Yeah.
In the last 2 years. Yeah.
Well, but my point.
This is
because
cocktail party chatter.
No, but I see it differently,
Yeah.
Sam. I see your comment that, well, don't we want the best and the brightest? Where you don't reference wage competition. It sounds more like intellectual competition, right? When you open a border and selectively only in certain fields, it's like opening a window in an airplane, and it specifically affects the seat at which it's opened differently than everywhere else in the plane.
Right, right.
So the problem I have with this is that it's a large mimetic complex. And popping back up to the Jeff Epstein issue, the entire university and scientific complex was built on this incredible embedded growth obligation.
Right.
That is the thing that caused the system to have to rescue itself with immigration. So it's really not about immigration or brown people or I don't want to compete against the best and the brightest. The issue was we didn't have enough people to feed into a pyramid system. And what you could do is you could reference a poverty differential between Asia, which was training people acceptably well in technical subjects, but at a lower level. Now that's changed some, to fill in the bottom of the pyramid. And so that's really what it was. It was an economic exploit that has nothing to do with the best and the brightest or the color of one's skin. It was just a way of saving a pyramid scheme.
Well, so clearly there's room for innovation on all these fronts, and we should be eager to do it. And we should be certainly eager to find Ponzi schemes that we didn't know were Ponzi schemes, right? Like, I think again, this touches where we started when we were talking about Samantha Power and other, and the Southern Poverty Law Center. I think there are systems we set up with the best of intentions, and projects and mimetic complexes we launch upon the world with the best of intentions, and we don't see the way incentives will align, or the knock-on effects, or the externalities of doing those things. And I mean, it's just, the world is more complicated than we realize.
Well, and that's that's like the thing that scares me a little bit. Remember when I said that I have malware in my head?
Yeah.
My belief is that a lot of the beautiful things that you were thinking about being open to the world, training the best and the brightest, keeping some of them for ourselves, distributing some of them back home to grow the pie for everyone, et cetera, et cetera. That's a mimetic complex that I associate with malware. It's not that there aren't aspects of it which move me.
But I think it's close to the right program. So